the Gen G squad. I imagine Gen G's looking at either of these teams being like, okay, dumb one, please pick one of these guys. That would be great. We're happy to try our luck up against Nongshim because, of course, that was a great series that we saw in our very final match of summer. So much to think about, but this match itself, as we get into it, as we break it down, it's so extraordinarily interesting because this season, Liv Sandbox have just come out of nowhere and all of a sudden, they've got T1's number. They're 4-1 against this squad in games versus the team over this summer. Before that, guess how many games they'd won versus T1?
Very little.
0.
Yeah, that's very little.
Since spring 2020. Absolutely insane. I believe we've got some predictions, though, to bring up onto your screen. As let's see what Dongjun, Cloud Templar, and Kunkui said. Liv Sandbox 3-1s and 3-2s with Dongjun with a 3-1 for T1. I'm also sitting on the 3-1 camp. Valdez, very brave. We have often spoken about 3-1 Andys. I panicked, and I was a bit of a 3-1 Andy here today. I apologize. Valdez and Wolf, they are very stalwart in their prediction, and you believe this one's going to be a close one.
I don't even know. Especially now with Teddy getting subbed in. Like, I have, because that actually really changes the matchup as well. If it does what I think it should do. And I think that honestly, a complete 50-50 split, it would have been perfect because this one is impossible to call. I feel like with Nongshim and Freaka, yeah, Freaka had a really strong game, but that result never really came, I think, as a big surprise.
Yeah.
Nongshim also really growing in that series. With this one, I don't know.
No, it is very, very difficult to call. And if, to be perfectly honest, like if you became a fan of League of Legends and the LCK in summer of this season, you'd be like, in summer of this year, you'd be like, why isn't this all yellow? Come on. I mean, Liv Sandbox have looked great against T1 so far, but sometimes you do have to look towards the past in order to learn more. And as you can see, the fans do agree with that. 83%, obviously, T1, certainly, the fandom going to outweigh that of Liv Sandbox.
Yes.
So maybe there's a bit of voting from the heart going on here, but still, I mean, I think a lot of people, I mean, ourselves included, believe that T1 should be the favorites here, and it's not necessarily based on recent performance. It's based on how well this team plays in best of fives. You may have seen their last best of five up against Gen G. Guess what? That was the first best of five they'd lost domestically since 8 best of fives that they'd won. 8. So many. The last best of five that they lost, I think, was like 2 years prior to that up against KT or something like that. And that was actually one of our most hype best of fives that we've seen. Of course, internationally, things like that, it's a different story. However, domestically, this team is extraordinarily dominant. But let's bring up points of the match. Let's get into it. As T1 will face off against Liv Sandbox. We do have some surprises as well, based on the players that are going to be participating in today's best of five.
As even though the standings might not suggest it, with the nosedive that Liv Sandbox took at the end, I am still firmly in belief that this is a team that can, or in Sandbox rather, that can upset out of nowhere. But T1, when it comes to them firing on all cylinders, they look like one of the best teams in the LCK. And that is something that has been very hit or miss, and also why we should talk in more detail about the change that, of course, they have with Teddy coming in today. Because I think that for Liv Sandbox, that is a thing that is going to terrify you. Because even with Sandbox looking as good as they did, the way that they won this last series against T1 was with this exact play.
And it was Effort wearing the Alistair skin of his opponent's colors as well. That one, I believe, belongs to Wolf. So certainly Effort earning the right to use that skin, though, after all of his time spent on SKT himself. Now, of course, T1. But as you can see in summer, as we were talking about before, 4-1 in favor of Liv Sandbox. A little bit closer towards the end of the season, which is where you were talking about. The slight slump towards the end of the season for this team. As Carrier versus Effort, I absolutely love this matchup. For me, these are the two best performing supports of this season.
For Carrier, I'm not going to argue with you, because why would I? That would make me look silly, because Carrier is without a doubt, I think, the strongest sport we have in the
maybe even the strongest player that we have in the
you can make an argument for that, genuinely. I don't think he has any match. I think Effort is definitely top 3. I think it'd be between him and Callan. But Effort, I think, has been more important than Callan, because Effort's roams, and look at that, there we go.
Yeah, it doesn't spend a lot of time on the bottom side.
And it's something that is the main reason, in my opinion, why Liv Sandbox in the mid part of the season looked so dominant. Because I think later on teams got a little bit better at actually taking into account where Effort was, where did he go. But at the beginning, he won so many games single-handedly just by catching people off guard.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let's have a look at this mid matchup. Victor versus Lucian is what we're going to be zooming in on here. But as we can see, the matchup, not too bad for Fate here, as you can see. I love that Fate is actually named after Twisted Fate, and probably because he saw Faker playing it. That's what I have in my mind, because of course, Faker probably the most famous Twisted Fate player since Messiah, and just really, really cool that there is sort of that.
You can say that for so many champions though, Atlas, because we're looking at
true.
His rise, right?
And his Azir, and things like that. You know.
We can go on and on. And the Rise, I think, is going to be one of the most hotly contested picks today, because it is one of the things that allows T1 to play that extremely decisive, snowbally early game style that they've been so adept at. But it's also something that Liv Sandbox have used to great efficiency. Locked Carrier, and regardless of whether or not he's unlocked Effort, because he's going to leave anyway, he doesn't really care.
Very much looking forward to how this one's going to go. But as we can see, playoffs roster here: Canna, Cuz, Faker, Teddy, Carrier, Zeus, Owner, Closer, Gumushi, and Hoyt. This isn't, of course, the roster that they're going to be fielding today. That is going to be a mixture of subs and, I guess, theoretically main roster players. Liv Sandbox on the other side, Summit, Croco, Fate, Prince, Effort, with Howling and OnFleek still there sitting behind, but unlikely to see very much play. And this is the match record between the teams. This is what I was talking about. Going back to Spring 2020 Round 1, until this summer, Liv Sandbox hadn't taken a game off T1 at any point. Zilch.
And it is a testament to both the development of Liv Sandbox, how they perform in the current meta, as well as some of the troubles that T1 has run into. Because you can look at a lot of their stats that we saw in the previous video as well. Like, their gold stats are insane for T1. They're without a match within the LCK. But gold doesn't win you the game single-handedly. You need to do more than that. And that is where sometimes they falters. You can look at some drafts, you can look at some clutch moments. And when it comes to clutch moments, I think that's where Liv Sandbox, maybe not as much as Nongxin,
they steal games.
Yes,
they literally do. I mean, Effort dives into Baron pits and takes things with a pulverize.
Yeah.
For goodness sake. That is not, I mean, for those playing at home, don't rely on that. That's not the way that you win an actual game. However, Effort decides to skew things just a little bit. But yeah, Liv Sandbox just have a way of staying in a game when sometimes they may not necessarily deserve to. As first Dragon percent, Liv Sandbox certainly winning there. As you can see, T1 have been so focused on breaking structures, getting heralds, and winning the game before the dragon becomes a factor. And I find it really, really interesting that it feels like, you know, Fred at Brown were the Dragon Slayers, and it has sort of become Liv Sandbox that have decided that they want to kill a few more of those so far in round 2 of Summer anyway.